Hello, and welcome to the Remind Podcast, the podcast where we get inside the real estate entrepreneur's mind. My name is Harrison Smith. I'm the Director of Growth with the Matea Group here in Maine and expanding throughout New England. And I'm joined today by Peter Brandon. How are you, Peter?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me, Harrison.
Well, I appreciate you being on. Looking forward to talking about you and hearing about your story.
Cool. Yeah, let's
All
do it.
right. So, why don't we start off with why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're currently doing in the real estate space?
Sure. Yeah. So my name's Peter. I'm not a real estate professional. I don't work in the real estate industry. I work as an engineer and a wedding photographer in the summers. Um, and I've gone through two house hacks. Um, so that's kind of how I got started. Uh, and right now I'm, finishing up this, currently living in the second house hack and finishing up some renovations on that. And you kind of caught me at a time where, um, hopefully a turning point where I take this to be a little bit more than just the house hacks and continue expanding. So, yeah, that's where I am right now.
Awesome. So, we generally find people don't start in real estate. They don't, you know, graduate high school or college and say, I'm going to go right into real estate. So what drew you to real estate? How'd you end up getting involved in house hacking and investing?
Mhm. Yeah. So I'll spare the whole life story, but a lot of it's kind of relevant to what got me into this. So after college, I took a bit of a break from the engineering world, from what I had my degree in, and I wanted to be a mountain guide for a while. And so I was over in New Hampshire guiding on Mount Washington. And the reason that that's relevant is that that area around Mount Washington has no housing. And I think that we've heard that a lot recently with the housing crisis all over the country, but this area in particular is just brutal. And so that's what originally drew me towards real estate investing, believe it or not, because there was just nowhere to live. And I started looking into solutions and thinking about creative solutions. And for the first bit of time that I was up there, I could not find anything. And so I bought an old van and I thought, okay, well, I'm just going to live in the van. And I knew that that was something that climbers had done. And so that was my first exposure to that. I just said, the heck with it. I'm not going to, first of all, as an entry level climbing guide, not exactly the most lucrative um, thing to be doing. So when you're trying to find something that for housing, it's first of all very expensive if you can even find something. So I just said, you know what, I'm just gonna sleep in the van down by the river, and that's what we'll do. So that was the first go at that. The van ended up breaking down. I got stranded in this like mountain pass in New Hampshire, so that was very short lived. Um, and then ended up living in like the attic of my employer's commercial building for a while, and so through all of that, I was just like, man, this is ridiculous. Like, what if at the time I wasn't sure if I was going to continue with guiding, mountain guiding, or go back to engineering. And I just started thinking, how could I do this if I have to pay housing expensive, which are such a significant part of everyone's, life when you draw out like how much you spend on each category in a year. Housing is always this crazy expense. And so that's how I got tuned into house hacking and, some of the stuff that's out there. Because prior to that, I don't know, Harrison, like no one in my family was into real estate, or anything like that. And it's just funny, I had an apartment in college, but I honestly it never occurred to me to ask, like, where does this money go? It's just like, yep, pay rent. Here's the apartment. So then when the curtain got pulled back and I started reading all this stuff online about house hacking and just the real estate rental space in general, I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. I want to get into this. And the house hack in particular, I was like, boom, that's it. Like, that's how I could reduce my living expenses enough that if I wanted to keep guiding, which again wasn't going to be as lucrative as engineering field, I was like, I could probably pull this off, if I could bring down those expenses through house hacking. And so that's um, basically what brought me into it, was just that frustration of trying to find a housing solution for myself.
Yeah, that's amazing because generally what we hear is people get involved in real estate or investing because they see the returns, they see the opportunity, they get enamored by that allure of the money. And actually, in your case, it was out of necessity. I was in an area that I wanted to be in, doing a job that I loved. I had to find a way to A, find housing, but also B, find affordable housing. And so because of that, you accidentally got into real estate investing. Is that right?
Yeah, yep, and it worked out great. I don't know, can I go into that first house hack a little bit? Is that
Yeah, let's go through it.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah. Well, um, the timeline is actually a little odd. So I ended up not sticking with guiding, and I got a full-time job in Maine, working as an engineer. My first place in Maine was actually a room in this guy's house over in Falmouth. He was divorced. He couldn't afford the mortgage on his own, but he decided to rent out rooms to people. And um, I loved it. For me, I was like, man, this is really cool. Like, it was people from all walks of life. He had 5 bedrooms in there. Um, and it was just cool. And the funny thing about that we can talk about more, and something that I've learned a lot about, is that what he was doing was probably technically illegal
Mhm.
based on zoning and everything, which is just so funny because to me, he was providing this awesome service to the community by providing this housing. But anyway, we can talk about that a little bit more. So that really inspired me, basically seeing how he was renting out the rooms. So then I wasn't looking so much, oh, well, I need a multifamily. It's like, well, let's see, maybe there's a single family that meets this model. And so that's what I ended up finding in New Hampshire. And again, this is where it gets a little quirky because, I just mentioned I had the job in Maine, which was an office job. And then I bought a house in New Hampshire, but that's the one that I could find. And so, um, this is where I have to, well, let's talk about the house first. So even before COVID, it still wasn't an easy market. I know it's gotten crazy
Mhm.
since then, like way beyond crazy, but, um, as I mentioned, I bought it around that area in Mount Washington, and it was still a really competitive market. Um, the house that I ended up finding and actually was able to get with no competing offers, uh, there was a smoker in there previously.
Mhm.
So that was my way in on that property. And it was a single family with a accessory dwelling unit. And I absolutely love those things. They're awesome. So for anyone out there that, they're starting to become more and more prevalent. You're hearing a lot more about it. Towns are realizing that they need to create better housing policies because for years, everything has just been single family zoning only. And look where that's gotten us.
Yeah,
Um,
the ADU for years was the secret 2 unit that
right.
everybody
Exactly.
used. Yep.
Yeah, and it is for me right now. I mean, that property's been awesome. Bought it as a single family. I lived in it for a while, um, and rented out rooms in the main house, and then also rented out the ADU. And it was an awesome house hack. And it was a great. The people that lived there were so appreciative because again, um, no housing in that area, and so you know, young people that were working at the ski mountain or the pizza shop. It was a great space for them. I mean, honestly, I think a lot of people are probably like, oh man, I want roommates and stuff like that, which I totally understand. For me,
Mhm.
I was just out of college. So I was still pretty used to the whole roommate thing. Um, but I've had no issues with it. And even in the second house pack, I've continued with that model of renting room by room because I think it's a really missing piece of the market. That there's a huge need for people that are just getting out of college or grad school or in college that don't need a full apartment, maybe can't afford a full apartment.
Mhm.
But if that's like the most granular piece that you can get is an apartment, that doesn't really work that well. So um, it's been great. So anyway, yeah, that's the first house hack that I did.
So were you living in the house, like in one of the bedrooms and then renting the other bedroom out, or were you not living in the house at all?
So I was living in the house and I was also living in a car for the other part of it, right? So, you call that car hacking, if you will.
Yeah.
Um, so, and I was even living in the car before I got the house. So I to rewind a little bit. I was living in that guy's house that in Falmouth that was renting all the rooms. And then I started doing the math and I was like, you know what? I should just get a car and sleep in the car because I was doing the math and it's like, man, uh, after about a year, I'll have paid off the car and then it's profit if I can just sleep in the car. So then got that house in New Hampshire and it started ending up looking like I would go to Maine in the office for about, for the week. So that would be 4 nights in the car and then go back to New Hampshire, which made sense to me because at the time, like all my friends were in New Hampshire. My girlfriend at the time was in New Hampshire.
Mhm.
So coming into the office, going to work all day, going back to New Hampshire on the weekends, I wasn't going to spend a couple $100s a month just to sleep. So that just seemed silly to me. So that's where the car hacking thing came from, was just not being able to justify paying rent for just a bed. Like I could do that's what the car was for. And it was fine. I loved it. It was I miss it sometimes, honestly. Like the simplicity of it. I would sleep right next to a trailhead. I'd wake up, go for a run. There was a shower at work. I'd have my dress clothes in a little closet section of the car. Um, go and get dressed, go to the office. No one ever knew. So yeah,
That's
that's
fascinating.
what I did.
So you've got one of the constant complaints we hear in the real estate world is that nobody's ever got the capital to invest. They don't have the money. Where's the money? How do I find the money?
Right.
And so here you are, Peter, saying, well, I don't want to pay this much for housing. And if I'm going to pay this much for housing, I'm going to own the housing. So I'm going
Yeah.
to go live in a car for a period of time, save that money, put it back into real estate and get this whole cycle started. So, you weren't enamored by the returns. You were looking to solve a problem for yourself. Now, when you
Mhm.
look back, was it more about, I'm going to save this money and not spend it on something I don't have to? Or did you see the car as the path to getting further into real estate?
Well, it was both. I definitely saw it as I'm going to take this money and save it up for a down payment on another property. And really, it was the first property too, because I did the car thing for 2 years. I did the car before I bought the New Hampshire house and after. So for the second house, once I bought this place about 2 years ago, that's when I finally decided to warm. After I did a winter in the car, I was
Mhm.
ready to not do that anymore.
Yeah. So
But
I I don't know that anybody's recommending the car hacking routine, but I would just
no,
like to point out the fact that here's somebody who said, I'm going to get into real estate and I'm going to do whatever it takes. I'm going to save the money, find the property. If I have to buy it in New Hampshire while I'm working in Maine, I'll do that. Every potential hurdle to getting into real estate, money, location, deals, to all of it, you said, forget it. I'm just going to solve for all of it and get in.
yeah, yeah. And I will say, I think it's worth mentioning for sure that this was in many ways really casting in on that white male privilege. And I no problem saying that because sleeping in your car in random sketchy parking lots around southern Maine, definitely there's a lot of privilege that goes along with being able to do that and not really fearing uh that much. So, you know, don't want that to ever be misconstrued. But for sure, for me, it was a variable that I could control. And so I decided to capitalize on that variable. And that's something that I've always tried to do, kind of isolate the things that I can control for me. And I took that, level of personal sacrifice and capitalized on it. And I mean, you start adding up the numbers.
Mhm.
That car paid for itself 3 times over by the time
Oh,
I
for
was
sure.
done with it. Yeah.
For sure. And,
Yeah.
and all the hurdles and all the concerns and all the things that cause people to stop, you know, you just said, I won't let this stop me. I'll find another solution and did. And that I think is the biggest thing from your story is that people should take away from it is the fact that no matter what the hurdle was, it wasn't going to stop you. You were just going to keep going. I'm getting into real estate one way or another. I don't care what I have to do. and the level of sacrifice you were willing to endure is something that most people would never have gotten even remotely close to thinking about, let alone actually acting on. So I would say kudos to you for having that goal and that focus on it and not letting anything stop you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, if anyone wants any tips for, some good parking lots in Southern Maine, you
Yeah.
can ask me. I'll let you know. I got some good ones.
All right. So other than what we've talked about already in terms of real estate, what most attracted you to getting into real estate that, you know, led you to take that or go to that level of sacrifice to get in the game?
Um, yeah, I mean, again, I was just trying to be creative and find a solution for myself. Uh, was really where it came from. And again, originally it was because I was trying to figure out, okay, can I have this more of a passion job rather than a lucrative job? And then, but it shifted off of that. Once I realized how powerful the house hack was, I still didn't want to have an apartment in Maine. I just repeated that same process in Maine and found another house that, um, no one, again, no competing offers. Um, there was a roof leak on this one, and um, needs a lot of work. And that's kind of how I got into the two properties, or both of them were unwanted. But that's also where the value add was. So, um, you know, I just couldn't picture. Let me put it like this. I didn't think that I could or want or to afford an apartment. I didn't want a whole apartment for myself because I just didn't need it. But if I could have a house and then, sub house hack that out and kind of subsection it out to the point where, okay, I have a little apartment, but I own the whole building. That made sense to me. Or in the beginning, it was all I really need is a room, but I don't want to rent someone else's room. I'd rather just rent a room for myself and have control over the whole building. So that was definitely a motivating factor and continues to be. This place that I have for myself in Portland is a pretty good fit. All I need is a small apartment, and that's what I have. But I have the whole building, and so I've been able to benefit from all of the things that come along with that, and the negative side. People often forget to mention the less nice parts of house hacking, and
Mhm.
especially in old buildings in Maine, there's a lot of maintenance that goes along with that. But yeah, it's been good. I would do it 100 times over. I would recommend it to anyone.
So you mentioned value add as what you were, kind of searching for, but was that a financial strategy to find a value add property that you could increase the value of, or was that more of a how do I get it strategy in the sense of I'm going to go after the properties nobody wants so that I'm more likely to get them?
It was both. It was both. And let's see. I mean, so I think it's worth mentioning, like you and I, the way that we connected was through real estate, you working as an agent, right? And so we worked together for a time. And so that I would always send you the goofiest properties, like the ones that were just, I'm sure you just shook your head and being like, why? Like, why this one of all the ones that you could have? And I don't know. Some of it's probably like illogical. I'm just drawn towards the quirky
Mhm.
properties. Um, but there was definitely a time, again, before COVID, it was still very competitive. And
It was.
I put in offers on properties that just got outbid like crazy. And that's definitely, everyone's in the real estate space is familiar with that and has gone through that process. So um, I thought that the value add could be beneficial for actually obtaining the property for sure. And then also I didn't want to pay face value for a property that needed no work. And I was uh, from the whole car thing, like the self-sacrifice piece, I was willing to put in the work. And I actually wanted to. I wanted to learn about renovations. And that's something that I've really enjoyed throughout this whole process. Um, the one thing that I'll say about the value add, and this was probably one of my biggest lessons learned throughout this whole, like, the years that I've been in this, um, you get stuck in a very funny spot where you kind of need a property that doesn't need so much work that you're going to run into issues on the lending side, which happened
Mhm.
to me a bunch of times. But then obviously I don't want a house that's move-in ready. And so I got stuck in that area for quite a while with quite a few homes. And I think you and I worked
Yeah.
on a couple that fell apart. And it was so frustrating because it was like, seriously, like a couple broken windows or some thing, the roof leak. I mean, this property here, that again, this was the roof leak house. This
Yeah.
almost fell apart because of that. And there were so many hurdles that to me was just ridiculous. But that's where it became really important to have, a good team. And, you had Donna on as one of your other guests. So
Yep.
Donna was the one that I worked with on this properties, and, kudos to her for really sticking with me, because that, and, worked with, Chad at RMS on the lending side. And that was what ended up pulling it together. It would have fallen apart. The key piece specifically that let that all go through was they let me escrow money for the roof.
Mm.
And I didn't even know that that was something that you could do. Had I known that much earlier on, or, talked to the right people, that might have been an option for other places that I passed up or that fell apart. But I would say for anyone listening that's looking for a similar property, um, ask around and, find out for people that have done it, say, what's the thing that allowed you to pull it off? Because for me, I put so much time and energy into trying to figure out how to get past those issues with the value add on again, conventional loans. I wasn't
Right.
wasn't looking at hard money. I didn't want to go down that road at the time, and it just didn't work for the specific deals. But again, I was really that fine line between it wasn't a full gut at all. It was livable, but it just had some issues that made it not move-in ready. But again, the two properties that I've done so far, and I was able to pull it off, it's really paid off for sure.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned the team. I think that's one thing that everybody misses in this business is that it's so much about the people you surround yourself with. And not just the number of people, but it's more the who you surround yourself with. It's finding the people that see the world the same way you do, complement what you do, and can solve those issues that come up along the way. And for those people that are getting into real estate thinking that they're gonna, get all the headlines and be the ultimate solo act, this is a really difficult business by yourself, agent,
Mhm.
investor, whatever you do. It is all about the team and having those people in your court that can get things done for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially early on, right? Because as I move later into my real estate investing journey, I hope to have control of my own little capital pool that I can just say, yep, here's my cash offer. Now I get to be the person making those cash offers. But getting started, you don't have that unless you find a deal where you're willing, that's so good, or you're willing to pay that hard money cost, which I wasn't at the time. But unless you can do that, yeah, you absolutely need to have that team that can jump through and really push for you. And, looking out for your best interest is huge. There were properties that I sent to you early on, and you said, nah, I don't think this is a good fit, which I think is a testament to you, first of all, but also like those are the people that you want to look for, not just the people that are going to tell you what you want to hear, but
Right.
people that are going to really honestly understand your best interest and what you need. And I think that if there's anyone out there that's listening kind of more of as a beginner, um, you got to be careful, because there's people out there that look for newbies, say, yep, follow me, and we'll
Mhm.
just find you get into a bad situation. So you got to just make sure that you, again, testament to the team. And I would say for that, to how to find people, uh, is you got to network. Don't just sit online and Google, because you can never really know. You got to go to meetups and that kind of thing and ask people, like, who did you work with and did your
Mhm.
transaction go smoothly? And usually people are happy to make recommendations, except for contractors. You'll never pry that out of people.
Hmm.
I've found they will never
No,
give that up. If they find a good contractor, they will keep that secret. But other people, they will usually let you know.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, through all this, what would you say was the most difficult lesson you learned in your journey?
Well, we talked about some of the challenges. The biggest one for me, and this is a very personal thing, but I just really struggle with taking risks on stuff. And that definitely plays into the purchases that I've made. Um, I have just struggled to get to that point where I take the bigger risks, and I'm going to have to turn that corner if I want to scale, which I really do.
Mhm.
So, I have some friends now in real estate that constantly, tease me for just being like, why are you always playing it so safe? But that's just what I'm comfortable with. And that's where the house hack comes in for me. It makes a lot of sense on paper. Um, and so that's been my personal biggest challenge, is just feeling comfortable, um, taking on more risk. And, I look forward to kind of pushing myself in that area, again, as I kind of move forward. And hopefully this year, again, I'm finishing up, I feel like, with this property, and I'd like to get another one or more. I mean, I really want to scale. And I think if I want to do that, I have to stop looking at each property as like, okay, I'm going to live there, and, this is where the dog will run around. It's like, no, I got to start looking at them. This is a business asset. And we're looking at it in a different eyes. So that's been the biggest challenge for me. And, and other things that go along with that are like, they always say that's doing all the work yourself
Mhm.
can be one. And that's something that I really struggle with, because I like doing the work. I like learning. And now it is so hard to swallow the costs of having people come out. It's
It is.
crazy. So, um, I am thankful that I have learned. So now, at least if I do have people come out, I can tell whether they're taking me for a ride or not on what they're doing. Can look at stuff a little bit more. But, um, yeah, that's been my biggest challenge so far. And it continues to be in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and it's really important as you get into these sort of situations and get into real estate, especially, that you know who you are. You know where you're
Mhm.
comfortable. You know what works for you. We generally find, and you probably went through this phase too, where you're going to look at everything. I'm going to do everything. I want to be multis and Airbnb and single
Yeah.
families and house hacks, and people are all over the place. And I want to check it all out and look at it all. But you need to actually look at what works for you, where are you comfortable, what's your risk tolerance, what level of challenge are you willing to take. And there are some people that struggle to come to that realization of where they best fit. For you, you found a path that makes sense for what you do. Um, the value add side certainly has its own set of risks, and it's got its own
Mhm.
set of complexity and complication, but it works for you because, like you said, it gets back to, it's a business asset, it's a business decision, it's a financial decision. As long as I can live with that piece of it, the rest of it doesn't really matter. I can
Yep.
quantify where this can end up, and that works for me.
For sure. Yeah.
Awesome.
Definitely.
What is the one piece of advice you wish you had gotten when you got started?
Um, the biggest thing for me that it took me a little while to figure out, but the going in person and meeting real people doing this and talking to
Mhm.
them. So finding those meetups, that was the single biggest kind of turning point for me that made this all happen. Because up until then, you read stuff on the internet, and maybe you're a more trusting person than I am. I don't trust
Mm.
anything on the internet.
Agreed.
It's all fake to me.
Yep.
There's so much out there. And I mean, um, I also feel that there's certain, even from a couple years ago in the in real estate investing space, in terms of the educational materials and those types of things out there, uh, there are so many people out there ready to sell you a book or sell you a course or all the guru type stuff. There's so
Mhm.
much of that out there. And that really soured the whole thing for me so much that I was almost like, this is crap, like maybe I don't want to be part of this. Is this all smoke and mirrors? And then I went to a meetup in Southern Maine where that's where I met you, right?
Yep. Yep.
The first one, and I drove 2 hours from New Hampshire to get there. But that was the biggest thing, was meeting real people that were really doing it. I was like, okay, so this isn't just smoke and mirrors. There's
Mhm.
real people doing this. And that was the whole thing. It all launched from there, from all the conversations and meeting the people at those first couple meetups. That's what put the gears in motion for everything else. So that would be my biggest piece of advice is if you're just doing this on the internet still, uh, you got to make that. It's good to learn. It's good to read the books, but you have to start meeting people in real life. And that would be my biggest piece of advice for sure.
Yeah, I love that. Networking is key, and I've said this on a couple of past episodes where getting into rooms with people that are doing big things and at a higher level than you. You don't want to be the smartest guy in the room because then you're in the wrong room and you can't grow. But getting around those people that are doing it differently, there's things you can take from their experiences. Maybe you're not doing the same thing, but there's so much we can all learn in this business, in this industry from each other because we all have different ways of looking at things, different approaches, different strategies, different sources. Um, it is so different across the board, and getting around those people and actually having the real conversation of what are you doing, what works, what doesn't, that feedback and those conversations to me are worth more than anything. I mean, I pay money to go to these mastermind events to meet those people because you walk out of there with like real actionable information, not this kind of rah rah guru stuff, as you mentioned, that you find online from people that have done a deal or two and they wrote a book because what else are they going to do? They're not doing enough deals. They got to fill their time somehow. So they write a book and sell it to you because the newbie doesn't know any better. But
Yep.
being in those rooms is key for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And that really ties back to you asked me kind of what my biggest challenge was. And I
Mhm.
said, being able to take bigger risks. And so that is how I'm fighting that is by talking with those people at these meetups, people that are doing more deals than me. And that is what's really helping me grow. So that's why I just find that so important. You know, I've got close friends now that again, they have much different risk tolerance than me, you know, and they
Sure.
tease me about it, but it really helps me to see, um, and to talk through that with them and talk about their goals and think, man, your goals are way loftier than mine, but we're in a similar situations in terms of, you know, finances. So it's like, maybe I should try to raise that ceiling a little bit. Um, so yep, for sure.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. It's talking to people and realizing the mistakes you're afraid you're going to make. Somebody's already made them, and then realizing they're not fatal. They bounce back. They move on. They survive them. But being able to hear somebody else's horror story makes you realize that the outcome maybe isn't as scary as it seems, and makes a lot of it more attainable, at least in your mind.
Yep. Yep.
Awesome. Well, this has been a lot of fun, Peter. For those people that are watching that might want to talk to you more about what you're doing or maybe meet up, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Yeah, probably just shoot me an email. It's peterkbrandon@gmail.com. And yeah, any questions or anything like that, or I can direct you to a meetup in Southern Maine too. You come and chat. Be great.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate the time, Peter. It's been a lot of fun talking to you. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.